Welcome to our weekly live broadcast, tea friends. We're going to once again start by just drinking some tea together, share some tea and time in this space together. Hopefully you have some tea to drink, and together we can just sit and drink some tea for 30 minutes. Enjoy. Very nice to share some tea through the virtual world with some of you, wherever you are. I hope you are safe and peaceful and happy. I thought for today's lesson we could discuss a little bit of the one of the what are called paramitas, perfections in Buddhism. This one is called Aditan. Aditan means determination. And today more I want to talk about the qualifications of determination and renunciation, which I think are very relevant to the situation that many of us find ourselves in. Of course, the relevancy of this teaching to your life will have to happen in your own tea sessions. You'll have to work with that on your own and drink that tea on your own and see what it means when it digests into you. But I think, for me anyway, that the qualifications of determination are important at this time. So our renunciation, our retreat from the world has to be qualified by three principles, three aspects, three understandings, three factors. The first important aspect of determination is that it must be done very strongly, but with a spirit of friendliness. So as we distance ourselves from unhealthy influences, both external and internal. We must do so in a friendly way, strong but friendly. And the friendliness is very important when distancing oneself from unhealthy influences on the outside. That friendliness is important so that we do not encourage condescension or pride or a feeling of like, I'm clean and those people are not, or I'm spiritual and those people are not, which is all very absurd and very non-spiritual, is anti-Zen, that kind of sentiment. So it's not in the spirit of Tea and Zen. So in terms of distancing oneself from unhealthy influences outside, we must do so with a friendliness. It is my nature to travel over here. I wish you good fortune, my friend, as you travel over there. Not higher or lower, not any kind of... it's also very important that it not be a sense of pushing, because not only can if we're not friendly towards the world that we're retreating from with determination, if we're not friendly, we will dangerously cultivate pride and hubris and condescension, but also could result, if we push, it could result in judgment. And judgment blinds us. We are not free nor have the right to judge any other being. And it blinds us. As Jesus used the analogy, the sinner has the splinter in their eye, but the one who judges them has the log. And he's using the metaphor of sight because he's saying basically that person is partially blinded by their unhealthy influences, but your judgment is an even more unhealthy influence that is even more blinding. So even though you think you have moral high ground or superiority, you actually have slipped into the pit beneath that which you judge. So pushing can create this kind of judgment and what a lack of friendliness and that kind of thing as we retreat from unhealthy influences, be it junk food or whatever worldly influence that is not healthy for us. As we move away from it in determination, we can cultivate judgment, we can cultivate condescension and pride. So for all those reasons, we have to be friendly as we retreat. And then in terms of internal influences, which we also need to retreat from, our own character defects, our own inferior influences within us. As we retreat from those, we also must maintain friendliness, right? So that our retreat is not escapism. It's not a pushing against anything. Real renunciation never includes judgment. Real renunciation never includes pushing, right? Because as they say in Chinese, push and pull are the same rope. So if you're pushing on something, you're as caught up in it as the one who is pulling it. You're as influenced by it, right? It has as much sway over your system and over your state of mind as the one who is desiring it, right? So the one who is pushing against a desire for junk food is as influenced and wrapped up in an attachment to junk food as the one who is craving it and eating lots of it, right? So we don't want to push and we don't want to escape. We're not trying to escape anything. And this is important. So as we retreat with determination, there must be friendliness, strength and friendliness. That's the first principle of determined renunciation, of determination. The second principle is that there cannot be any compromise. There cannot be a trace of compromise. There is no compromising with unhealthy influences. You can't have them sometimes. You can't. There's no amount of poison that's not toxic. And they are one of the negativities of in particular related to kleshas, which are our defects of character, is that you give them an inch and they take a mile. So they are like mildew in the bathroom. If you allow a little spot of it, it will soon cover everything. You can't, it's like a room full of kindergartners. You can't think like, oh, I'll just leave them alone for 3 minutes. It's just 3 minutes, right? What could happen in 3 minutes? And you'll see what can happen in 3 minutes. So there is no compromising, basically. There's no compromising with inferior influences, with negative influences. Your stance has to be extremely firm. We talk about the sword of wisdom of Manjushri, which is a single-edged sword. He holds a single-edged sword. Though in some depictions he may have a double-edged sword, but for this metaphor, he holds a single-edged sword. So one side is dull and one side is sharp. And what is the meaning of that? The meaning is that towards the past, the knife is dull. Facing the past, the knife is dull. Means that in the past, I did the best that I could with the mind that I had. I made many, many mistakes. I hurt others. I hurt myself. And I choose to learn from those mistakes, but I also choose to forgive myself and release myself and understand with compassion that I was doing the best that I could at that time with the mind and body that I was carrying. And so I forgive myself. So there's infinite dullness, infinite forgiveness facing into the past. But towards the future, there's a diamond razor sharp blade that cuts through everything. And that towards the future, that is zero tolerance. Zero tolerance, right? The moment that you, in the present moment, give any of your unhealthy influences any tolerance, even 1%, you see you've opened a doorway into the future for that 1% to just continue growing. You've allowed it to continue, right? You might not be able to stomp out all inferior influences right now at this moment, because some of them are habits that were created over days, months, years, decades. And so they have residual power. So even if you stop, they will echo into the future. So you might not be able to stop them, but what you can stop right now in this moment, what you can quit right now is you can quit allowing them to be. You can quit giving them space. In other words, you can hang up the eviction notice. Like, nope, I have no more tolerance. It's time for you to go. It may take some time to actually evict them because they're an ornery, nasty tenant. And they're going to like take you to court and there's going to be battles. But the eviction notice has been hung. So eventually, no matter how much destruction they cause, no matter what, they're going to leave now. Because you've made a strong determination, you've made a strong commitment that you have zero tolerance for them. That you shall not on my watch. Yes? Not while I'm awake. You shall not participate in my state of being unless it be due to my unconsciousness. Unwillingly, you will overcome me, maybe, but not on my watch. So that's the attitude of zero tolerance. That's the attitude of zero compromise. There's no compromising with unhealthy influence. This is the second principle. So the first principle is that we retreat with great determination, but we do so with friendliness. Yeah, friendliness. And the second is that there can be no compromise. And the final determining factor when it comes to determination is that it cannot be achieved through force. You cannot eliminate defects of character in yourself, nor can we as a society eliminate defects in the world through force. You cannot, to use binary terms, in Zen we don't usually talk about good and evil. I don't really like being stuck in those binaries. But if you allow me that caveat that I don't really like this word, it may help to understand, is basically that what I'm saying is that evil or negativity, ignorance, evil as soon as you brand it as enemy, it turns to weapons. And if you do it a favor, which it wants, if you do it a favor and go with it blow for blow, you will become as entangled in hatred and passion as it is. You will be no different. You just as it feels justified to fight, you will feel justified to fight, and in the end, you'll be all covered in dirt, just as from rolling around and fighting with it. Then as it is, you can't defeat negative influences through force. That is doing the negativity a favor. And that applies to our own internal negative influences and outwardly in the world. You can't like defeat them. You can't beat them with force. You kill this person and his cousin wants to fight you. You kill that person and his brothers and neighbors want to fight you. It doesn't ever end. There's not a way to defeat it through force. The way to defeat evil or negative, unhealthy influences. I like unhealthy better than the word evil. I keep reminding you of this warning that I don't like this word. I'm just using it for the sake of conversation. Don't get stuck too much on it. But darkness, maybe. The best way to defeat darkness is to pursue the light with determination. So the best way to defeat evil is to pursue good with great determination, not to forcefully eject it. It doesn't work. You'll get as caught up in it as right. So if you get angry because there's angry people in the world, you just become another angry person, basically. This is the story of the tar baby in the South, right? The farmer puts out a tar baby to catch the fox because the fox is very proud. So he makes a baby out of tar that is like looking like it wants to fight. And the fox comes into the farmyard and says, "Hey, what are you looking at like that?" And the tar baby, of course, just continues to stare because it's not alive. And the fox then says, "If you don't stop, I'm going to hit you." And then, of course, he hits it. And then he says, "If you don't let go of my hand, I'll kick you." And then he kicks it. And if you don't let go of my foot, I'll kick you with the other foot. And eventually the fox is trapped by his own anger, right? So these negative influences inside of us, all kleshas, they're mind-made, so they don't actually have any power in the world. Their only power is to trick you into acting. And then the consequences of your actions will be real. Will be real, right? It's like somebody has a child has a nightmare and they aren't sure they're awake or asleep and they think there's a carrot monster in their closet and they get up as a result and run down the hallway and trip and fall down and bruise their knee. The pain from bruising their knee, the falling down, the fear in their body, the beating of their heart, the adrenaline, all those things are real. But the carrot monster is not. So the only power the carrot monster had was to trick the person into actually taking action. And those actions will have real consequence. So these kleshas can't be fought because fought is taking action. They aren't defeated with force. And then when you transcend them by pursuing the light with determination, some of them become servants. They are the guardians outside the temples in Buddhism. Your defects of character serve you. I have a very big mouth, and I am articulate and like to talk. And when I was younger, I used that to argue or to pursue my selfish aims, and now I use that to talk about Dharma and tea. So that is a defect, a demon that has been chained and utilized to serve the light. Other demons, once you start pursuing the light with determination, they become little imps. They are just cute little things that make you unique. They don't need to go. They don't need to be anything other than just there. They're not a problem. But you can't defeat the negative influences inside yourself, nor can we defeat them in the world through force. That just breeds them. It's like in the comments of YouTubes or other forums on the internet, there are trolls, people who are just trying to be negative. If you reply to those people, that's what they want. You reply, if you brand them and you go blow for blow, you're doing them a favor. You will just be entangled in the passion and negativity that they are coming from. The answer is to, in a friendly way, with strength, friendliness, no compromise. You pursue the light with determination, and continue to pursue the light with determination. That's the answer to that there is evil in the world, that there is darkness in the world. You continue to pursue the light in determination. You don't fight. There's nothing to fight. And when you fight, you just get stuck in the tar. And you just feed them, basically. So the only way forward is through forgiveness, through tolerance, through pursuing the light with determination. If you remember these three principles, they will be of great benefit in your path and practice. There's a lot more to unpack, but we are limited by time. But I find that these three aspects of determined renunciation are very important and relevant to what's going on in the world and what's going on for me, and maybe for some of you as well. So let's have some, we have a little bit of time left. We can have some questions.
So we have a question from Sean on the app. He wants to know about whether he can use all teas, leaves and bowl.
So somebody's asking if you can use all teas when you brew tea leaves in a bowl. The answer is no. Ideally, when we brew leaves in a bowl, we want to use striped leaves, which are long, thin leaves, or you can use also ball oolong, just a few balls in the bowl. But like compressed teas or teas that are little buds, you technically could put them in the bowl, but like a compressed, it would be hard to know the amount. It would open up and there'll be bits, and you'll be like doing that as you try and drink. So those teas aren't really conducive to leaves in a bowl. So better you stick with some striped teas like Elevation or maybe a ball tea, and that's important because that method of tea brewing is good. I think it's when you start with leaves in a bowl, and I recommend 6 months or a year of that before you move on to other brewing methods. And if you never did that in your beginning of your tea journey, I would recommend going back and doing that. It's always important to create a foundation. It's never too late to create a foundation. And during that time also, I think it's healthy to not pursue like the need to drink every tea. Find 5 that suit different times of day and suit your body, and it's enough for that time.
So one of the questions we couldn't address last time comes from Måns from Sweden, and he asks, how would you describe the duality of wanting or needing to change, achieve and develop, and the frustration of our current standstill versus living in the present moment?
So this is a question from last week from my brother Måns. He's asking about basically the dynamic or dualism between like the world's in a standstill, but there's a desire to, basically the debate that's happening in most countries about the economic impact of lockdown and standstill versus the the need to be safe, I guess, and that then relates to dynamics of like the desire to change and grow and the desire to be present, and those are both there, and they are both important. You can't be off balance in either one. This is in Chinese martial arts, we talk about mountains and rivers. So the mountains are very important for the country because they provide defense, and they provide natural barriers, defense and strength. So without that strength and determination, there's no, you can't even start to build an economy, because you'll have the tribes that are always attacking, and you'll be constantly fighting, and that'll be depleting all your innovation and even as Dong Hui Zong said, like you can't have the flourishing of arts like tea without stability, right? So, but then you also need, in those days in China, all commerce happened on water by boat. So they one of the largest infrastructure projects on this planet was all the canals that were built in ancient China, and they transported all their goods on water, far more than roads. So the water means like the flow, the economy, the openness, and that is necessary too. Otherwise, it all just becomes a desert mountain place. The mountains need water to grow, and the water needs the mountains to flow down. So the mountains represent the determination to change and become better and grow. And the water you could think of as the present moment awareness. And in the present moment awareness, there cannot be any ambition. And these things have to be in balance. However, for most of us, we can think of this in terms of yin and yang. And the yin is more passive and present. And the yang is actively pursuing something, right? For most humans, and obviously there are exceptions, but for most of us, we're off balance in the side of the yang. So it's very helpful for us to lean towards the yin, lean towards the present moment awareness, let go of ambition and desire to come, because ambition and expectation really. Those aren't really healthy determination. Ambition is essentially throwing yourself away, because it's throwing your energy into the future. It's just throwing all your energy into the future. You're constantly, focused on what will be, and that actually is not a good recipe even for success, for many reasons, right? There's the old Indian story where the boy comes and asks the monk, how long will it take for me to reach a state of awareness like you? And the man says 5 years. And he says, well, what if I work hard every day? He says 10 years. He says, well, what if I become a monk and live here and work all the time? 15 years. And the boy is very confused and says, why is it every time I say I'm going to work harder, you increase the amount of time? And he said, because one eye on what you're doing and one eye on the goal means you are going to mess up half the time. 2 eyes on the goal means you have no eyes on what you're doing, and you're going to mess up all the time. So your fixation on a particular goal means you're not paying attention to actually create the conditions for that goal to arise. You can think of this, and then when you do get there, if you've made a habit of throwing yourself into the future, also you won't really be there for that success when it does arrive to celebrate it or be onto it, because that habit will kick in again, and you'll start throwing yourself into the future again. And so you won't really enjoy it, Like people with lots of ambition generally do not attract the people that they need to help them to actually achieve their goals, because people don't want to work with someone who's ambitious, because they're fixated on a goal and they don't see what's around them, and are often then, will mistreat people. And even if they do, through sheer force of will, burn all bridges and put their head down and reach their goal on their own, they'll find that oftentimes that it's now they're alone. They don't have anyone to enjoy it with, and they've burned the bridges to get there, and they're just full of regret. And so the other issue, I talked about this in the broadcast the other day, the other issue is that when you empower the ego's solutions, you become hypnotized by them, right? You become hypnotized by your ego's ambitions, what it wants, the solution that it wants to see. And you don't take the time then to step back and actually analyze the motivations the ego has for offering that solution. And those motivations are almost always selfish and immature. And so that solution actually ultimately is not even good for us. And because we're so fixated with tunnel vision on that solution, we also miss out on other solutions that might be more conducive to our environment and to us. So for most of us, there's a need to focus a little bit more on present moment awareness, and a little bit more on the yin, and a little bit more passivity, and trust in nature to work things out instead of meddling and trying to do so much, right? Force nature to look a certain way, as opposed to looking at nature and seeing the way she is and celebrating that before we start changing her. And then we can change her in a way that like channels her energy, in a way that takes her energy in the way that it was already moving and channels it and lets it flow that way that it was already wanted to go, but maybe flows that way with a little bit more force, right? So she, you know, for example, like you could say, like in technology we could figure out a way to, like, there's already solar energy. We don't have to burn anything or dig holes or cause any of the problems that fossil fuels cause. We take the solar energy and we find a way to enhance it and push it and make more out of it than what we're capable of right now. So we create better cells that absorb more of it and that are able to like transfer more of it. And this is a way that I mean where you're taking the current that nature's already going and you're enhancing it and flowing with it, as opposed to taking the river and saying, no, I want you to go this way, and breaking the river and all of its ecology and killing and destroying so much to get it to flow where you want it to. And we do that as a society because we do that as individuals. We take reality and say, no, you have to look this way, and try to force the flow to go to the solution that we want. Right? And this is the source of our suffering. So present moment awareness is not zombie-ness, though. It's not about becoming a pincushion and you then don't pursue goals, right? It's just that you need determination, but you don't need to be so psychologically invested in any outcome. So you can balance these two things. They need to be balanced, obviously. We need to have discipline and determination and grow. The Zen way of saying this, you know, Zen has its paradoxes, its koans or witty riddles and things. The Zen way of saying this is like you're perfect just as you are, but you could use a little work. Right? So I'm perfect just as I am in this present moment, but I could use a little work. These things are paradoxical, but they have to work and flow together. They're dynamic and we have to find balance. However, I would suggest that for most humans, most of us, we have too much yang, we have too much energy, we're too ensorcelled by egoic influences, and so we need to rest in more meditative, passive yin energy, which is just about this present moment, being perfect as it is, and not investing so much ambition into making things look a certain way. But however, there might be somebody who needs more yang, who's too passive and they need more direction. Obviously that happens too. So, you know, this is a dynamic that is just there and always will be. And it's a difficult one to work with, right? But I would suggest letting go of ambition, because ambition is an unhealthy version of determination, right? There's only one exception to like wanton, unbridled ambition, and that is the awakening of all beings. If the awakening of all beings is your goal, then pursue it infinitely with all unbridled force. But otherwise, there's not really any ambition that is that will result in success. So, true success. And expectations also are related to that same energy. And expectations are problematic because, like when you come to a teacher and ask for advice, and you have expectations, you're basically looking for a particular answer. And because you're looking for a particular answer, you're going to warp the answer. It's going to be twisted. It's going to have to pass through that filter. You're not going to hear it very well. And if the answer is not the answer that you wanted, now you're going to have an uphill road in order to heed that advice, because it's not the advice you wanted. So expectations also are not good.
Owen is asking, can you please elaborate on how one receives this teaching of determination from tea and tea practice?
Which teaching?
Can you elaborate on how one receives this teaching of determination from tea and tea practice?
From how does the practice of the determination relate to tea practice? I guess is the well, it relates in a general way. If you're talking about the teaching that I gave about the three aspects of determination, these are Buddhist teachings, and that we retreat with friendliness, that we don't compromise with our defects of character, and that there is that we don't that there's no force. We don't try to forcefully remove negative influences in the world or in ourselves. In a general way, this relates to tea because the most important element in tea is the one who is brewing, the mind of the brewer. So, an experiment that you can do to verify this yourself is you set up tea with the same tea and the same teaware, and you switch brewers mid-session, and you will see that it becomes a very, very different tea. So, just as this is true of any art, just as the same sheet of music played on the same guitar by two musicians will sound completely different based on not just their skill. The less skilled one might be the more impactful performance if it has more soul, right? So it's the being through which it flows. So there's nothing more relevant to the tea than the mind of the brewer. And that goes both ways. Not only is the mind of the brewer the most influential influence in the creation of the cup of tea, but the mind of the brewer is also of incredible, the mind of the drinker is then of incredible importance in the reception of the tea, right? So the great tea master Baisao in Japan 500 years ago said something that is as true today as it was then. He said, tea contains the essence of nature. It's too bad all those people just prattle on and on about its color and aroma. So here's this medicine with the essence of nature, and the minds of the average one who is drinking is just prattling about the colors and flavors and missing out on that. And that's not due to any, again, condescension or lower or higher. It's just like the focus is off, and so they're missing out on a lot of what tea could provide. And that's so the mind of the receptivity and openness and clarity and mental acuity and spiritual acuity of the drinker and of the brewer is absolutely relevant in what tea is prepared and what tea and how it is then consumed and how deeply consumed and how used. So basically that means that my tea teacher always says that in order to prepare tea properly, you have to first become a person. Animals don't make tea. And my interpretation of what that means is basically that, as Michelangelo said, an artist must, as much as possible in their life, strive to be a saint. For the closer they are to God, the more that they channel God's light through their art, right? That was his Christian framework for these things, yeah. So, but every artist will ultimately come to a point where you realize that the purification of the self is not just relevant to the practice, but is the central most important factor in any skill or art. So that the more cultivated I am, the better tea I can make, and the better I can drink tea as well. The more sensitive I am to it, and that includes its colors and flavors. The more sensitive I am, the more that I will experience in terms of its colors and flavors, along with the essence of nature and all those other things. So talking about, all tea lessons are life lessons. If tea is for you a hobby, it's something that you do. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing at all. And you and I still have a lot in common. And there's still, because tea is that, for me too, I'm not, that tea is a spiritual elixir, or it's a beverage. We can erase that or and put a more healthy and. I'm okay with it. And you read our magazine, you'll very quickly realize that I am amongst the world's biggest tea geeks. I love tea geekery, and I feel like right now, the state that the world's in, it's a little bit banal or maybe irresponsible of us to have conversations about, this shape of teapot versus this shape and this type, and geeky things, because there's a lot of people suffering, and it's an opportunity to, there were people suffering before, but this is an opportunity to wake up. And so I feel like pursuing more discussion of the Dharma. So there's nothing wrong with that, and I can meet you there. That's not a problem. But for me personally, right, tea is much more primarily an aspect of my spiritual cultivation, and that happens to be Zen. And that's the other aspect that I would say where there's a relation, is you have also a historic relation. So, the mainstream of China was introduced to tea through Zen monasteries. So, the mainstream got tea from Zen monasteries, and then the world got it from mainstream China. So, if you are a part of a tea lineage that has any breadth or depth, longevity, in other words, at some point that tradition will have to pass through the halls of Zen. And so there's a historical relationship that is very deep and strong between tea and Zen, far more deep and strong than I can answer in a short broadcast like this. So those are all the general ways in which this lesson of determination applies to tea. But I could also find very specific ways in which it does as well. Let's take just one brief example for each one. The retreating with friendliness, right? As I retreat from so-called low-quality teas, I do so in a friendly way. I'm not condescending those who are using improper who lack, they're using improper agricultural methods or lack the skill to process tea in the way that it should be, because tea, it's never tea that is crap or low quality. It's what humans have done. Tea left alone in the forest, it turns out just fine. If a tea is low quality, it's because humans either stewarded the plant improperly or lacked the skill to process it. So, as I move into higher levels of tea, I don't want to be a snob. I don't want to not be able to sit in a friendly way and drink a tea bag out of a mug with your grandma. I'm happy to do that, right? So I retreat in a friendly way. Number two, there's no compromising. So in the same way, there's no compromising with the form, the tamai. The method is everything, right? So the method has to be adhered to properly. And then number three, you can't remove any of these defects in tea from the state of the seed into the ground all the way to the misbrewing through force. So you're not going to force people to stop using agrochemicals and let tea grow into trees and etc. You just, the best way to cause that to happen is to pursue the light with determination. So promote those who are growing tea sustainably and healthy, and promote good healthy tea. Promote the proper brewing of tea, and promote the proper consumption of tea within a life and the proper lessons. These are just small examples of ways that you could also impact. So, in essence, the answer to your question is that in general, the cultivation of self impacts all that you do, including your tea practice. And if your tea practice is a practice of cultivation, self-cultivation, then of course they are already one. That's the general answer, and that Buddhist teachings are married to tea. Cha Chan Yi Wei, Zen and tea are one flavor. They are interwoven through each other historically. And then on an actual practical level, all of these things, you can unpack them and work with them yourself. However, as I mentioned in previous broadcasts, I want these broadcasts during this time in the world, I want us to focus more on our cultivation and ourself and less on the geekery of tea, because this is an opportunity, and because right now as we sit here drinking this tea online, lots of people are suffering and lots of heroes are working hard to alleviate the suffering of those people. And so this is an opportunity for us to really wake up, remember what's important, and utilize this chance to learn and grow together. And so that's why I'm focusing more on aspects of self-cultivation than on specifics of tea. I hope that answers your question. If tea is a hobby for you, then the pursuit of self-cultivation may not be as relevant. But we are still friends and tea friends, and then we could come back another time and have a different chat about teapots or art, or even if tea is just a beverage to you, I'm fine with that too, as long as then my conversation would be about sustainable agriculture, so that beverage is produced in a way that is healthy for the earth, healthy for farmers, and healthy for those that consume it. And that's the conversation I'd like to have with those who drink tea as a beverage. And the conversation that I would like to have with those who drink tea as a hobby is all about tea history and art, and which pots and kettles and how to pour, and right. I'm a Zen monk, so I want to live my whole life I've committed to live my whole life in terms of Zen practice. And so of course my tea, like every other area of my life, is committed to the cultivation of Dharma and Zen. I drink tea this way because that's who I am. But it's not as if I also just made that up. It's been going on for centuries or millennia. So it's not, it just is that's an aspect of tea, and an important one for me. I don't know if I'm completely off. I just detected in that question that maybe there's misunderstanding why we're talking about these aspects of self-cultivation, how they relate to a discussion about tea. And in general, they relate because of that, because self-cultivation is self-cultivation. And so how I cultivate myself influences my tea, and how I make tea then influences how I cultivate myself. And they are cyclical. The better that I am, the more awake I am, the better tea I prepare, the better I am to receive it, which helps awaken me. And then the more awakened I am, the more better tea I make. It's this cycle. The more awake I am, the better tea I make, and the better I am to receive said tea, and that receive it in a way that awakens me. And then the more awake I become, and so on and so on and so on. This is cultivation. My tea is an aspect of self-cultivation, of mindfulness, of presence, of nature, medicine, and plant medicine, of interbeing and connection to the oneness and lack of separation between myself and every moment. So anything that cultivates me cultivates my tea, and anything that cultivates my tea cultivates me. All tea lessons are life lessons, and all life lessons are tea lessons. So that's the difference between, you can make cabinets, pay attention to the verbs. You can make cabinets, and you can make cabinets for all kinds of reasons. You can make cabinets as a hobby because you enjoy it, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can make cabinets as a job, for money. You can make cabinets because your father made cabinets, right? But then there are those who wish to be a cabinet maker. And when you are a cabinet maker, then included in cabinet making will be A, an approach to how to live a human life, and B, an approach to the world in which that life is lived. So there are people who are interested in tea to make a living. There are people who are interested in tea because it's a hobby and fun for them. But I am a Chajin. I am seeking to be tea. And so included in my tea practice is an approach to how to live a human life and an approach to the world in which that life is lived.
There's quite a few other questions. Someone is asking, I have many friends who drink and appreciate tea, but very rarely I can do it with someone in peace and quiet. I wish I knew how to encourage people to contemplate and feel the act of tea making more, but I don't want to come with the forceful attitude of sit down, don't talk, and do what I want you to do.
Yeah. So this is a very, very good question that highlights what I was talking about earlier about how, like, this person is, the question was basically how to get people to sit and drink tea in quiet and you're not wanting to forcefully make them be quiet, because the energy of like, hey, you, is more disruptive than whatever it is they were doing. If I'm brewing tea and some people start talking and then I go, shh, right, that's obviously more disruptive than they're talking, right? And you see the force doesn't work. So this is back to the question that I just said. Ultimately, this may sound foo-foo, but it's absolutely true. What I just said, like when tea is prepared out of stillness, it will encourage others to go to the stillness within themselves. So the answer to your question is the answer to the previous question. The previous question was like, what's all this got to do with tea? And the answer is, the more cultivated and peaceful and present I am, the more that will shine through the tea that I make, the more that those that drink it will be quiet. The quieter I am inside as I prepare the tea, the quieter those who drink it will become. It really is that simple. The more cultivated I am, the more I can make that peace happen just by not by forcefully extinguishing it. Trying to make peace forcefully is like trying to make the water be peaceful by smacking the ripples. You just get more ripples. So you can't do, but what you can do is pursue the light with determination. So you pursue, in this case, peace and quiet with determination. And the more peaceful and quiet, this may sound foo-foo, but I mean it. The more peaceful and quiet you are, the more you cultivate that in your life, the more you prepare tea out of that spirit, the more others will drink it and go to that space naturally, without any force, right? So the more that you can come from that place and brew that into your tea, the more that it will help others in that way. I promise it'll work. And you can also gently and passively suggest, when people sit down, why don't we drink 3 bowls in silence? And then we'll have a conversation, right? Conversations that come out of stillness are much better conversations, right? The old saying, older than the modern word for tea, the old modern word for tea in Chinese is cha, but there's an old saying, ping ming, nun dao, which basically means drink tea and discuss what's important. Drink tea and discuss the dao, right? People have been doing this. In that case, the Ming is the tea. It's an older word for tea. So drinking tea and talking about from heart space, about what matters, is ancient. And so when we have a few bowls or a few cups of tea in silence, then the conversation itself flows also out of stillness and out of a heart-centered space. And we talk, instead of about banal, useless things, we talk about what matters, what's important. And we connect with each other much more deeply, really look in each other's eyes and be present onto each other. So, so it's not, that all tea has to be formal. There's casual tea as well. But, there's a time for sitting upright and being formal. And there's a time for being casual and loose. And if you're stuck in either one, you're not, then mountains and rivers. If you're all rivers, the land becomes a swamp. If you're somebody that can only wear t-shirts and jeans and you don't know how to dress up and be formal when the occasion calls for it, that means you don't know how to honor and respect properly. And you don't have mountains, you don't have stability. It will result in a swamp of stagnation. But if you're too formal and rigid and always in tight clothes and everything's super tight and you can't loosen up, also then you don't have flow, you don't have change. Your mountains become dry, deserts, right? So we have to have a balance of these two things in our life and in our practice. Even a formal tea session includes flow. And even a casual tea session includes moments of uprightness. So they are not actually opposed to each other. They are working in dynamic. So the answer is basically cultivate peace, and that includes the space. The more that you drink tea peacefully in a particular space, the more peaceful you are, the more that space, and you will help others to be at peace when they come to it, right? Dogen Zenji said, when you enter the space, practice begins. So that means that when the space is cultivated properly, people come into it and practice begins. When you walk into a church, a temple, whatever, you immediately, like peace just, right? It just happens. You don't have to do anything. So that space has been cultivated, sometimes for thousands of years, right? And it's strong. Sometimes it has nature power too. But yeah, the answer is just that. You can't force it. You can't force it with determination. You have to just pursue the light with determination. And the more cultivated you are, the easier that will become. I promise. And in the meantime, you can offer suggestions. Let's drink and set the time so that people don't feel uncomfortable. Instead of saying, let's drink tea in silence and nobody knows how long they're going to have to do this and it's very uncomfortable, you just say 3 bowls. Then everybody knows, okay, 3 bowls of quiet, I can do that. There's a little bit of quiet, and it's a start. There are other aspects. This is where training comes in also. I would suggest, you learn more. There are aspects of the tea ceremony in our tradition, for example, and every tradition, that help facilitate that in others. And then there's the final answer to this question is the one that's the most harsh, which is that, sometimes there are connections in the world that are essential for us, like family members. Right? It doesn't matter how unhealthy your brother is; that person will be your brother until you die. But there are also other influences in our life where we need to disassociate in a friendly way, with strength and friendliness. I don't know that is relevant to the person who's asking this question. I'm not saying that. I'm just pointing it out because it is an aspect of the answer. It might not be the answer to any one of you specifically, but it is in general an aspect of the answer for someone, which is that, if I, in other words, am starting to pursue spiritual cultivation, as they say, at the beginning of things, association is paramount. When you're starting out in anything, it is paramount that you associate with others who do that thing and who are skilled at that thing, so that you can learn and grow. That doesn't end actually ever. You do get more independent as you get stronger and more confident, but there's never a time where there's not a need to associate with others and get help. Hey, we're all beginners. We're all students. Nobody's a master of anything. I guess what I'm saying is that, sometimes maybe if I'm trying to live a more spiritual life and some of my friends are still partying and drinking and all that, and I'm starting to move away from that lifestyle, it's time to find some other friends that are interested in what I'm doing. And that doesn't mean necessarily completely again, it's done in a friendly way. So some of those people you might still hang out with and talk to, it's okay. It's just that I start to spend more of my time with these people that are walking in the way that I'm walking. And many of which are even further along. Right? And then some of those relationships in a friendly way will grow distant and go away. That's fine too. And others will continue throughout our life. And who knows, maybe some of those will also wake up and join us later on. But it's all friendly. We're not, again, no condescension, no I'm cool and spiritual. Then if you think that way, you're not cool. That's very uncool. And no pushing, right? Just very friendly. Instead of distancing by pushing those people away, is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you, with determination, pursue new relationships that are conducive to the new garden that you're trying to grow. So, in other words, it might be time for you to find some new tea friends that want to sit and drink tea with you in quiet. And that doesn't mean replace the old ones. You can still have tea with them too. It's all friendly.
2 more questions. Christine asks, do you have a certain mantra or word that you use to bring yourself back to present awareness when you're not sitting with tea?
There's someone asking if I use a mantra to return to present moment awareness, and the answer is no. I used my breath. or sensations in my body, particularly my hands. The breath for me is there's nothing wrong with a mantra, but the mantra is still words, it's still mind energy for me. And I'm very left brain. As I told you earlier, I'm very articulate, I'm a writer, I have been since I was, very young, 12. And as I said, that actually was a very unhealthy influence in my young adult life. Always talking too much, always getting myself in trouble, always arguing, always debating, always philosophizing, always do. And now I've learned to channel that demon through to talking about Dharma. So because of that, any kinds of words or images, visualizations are not the best medicine for me, but they might be for others. But for me, it's much more healthy if it's non-verbal and much more direct. So I use the breath, I breathe. I also like the non-sectarian aspect of it, that it's universal, that it's built by nature, not by the mind. That said, I do chant, and there is a mantra that I do work with, but I don't work with it in that way. That's what you're talking about is what's called like a chato in Chinese, which is like something that you carry around in order to return to presence all the time, all day long. That is there in Buddhism and more predominantly in Hinduism, but in Zen it's there. It's called chato, but I don't really work with mantra in that way. Though I do sit, and for 30 minutes, occasionally as a meditation exercise, I sit up and chant a mantra.
Dylan Steeples is asking, what is your advice for navigating the experience of grief caused by the loss of a loved one?
There's somebody asking about grief and how to deal with grief. We were thinking about doing a whole podcast about that. I'm actually passing through some grief right now. So we've been thinking about, it's a very big topic. I don't think there's time to answer it here. But the main answer, the gist of it is that if you love something, then you have a responsibility to grieve it deeply. And I'm doing that right now. We've lost someone in the last month here. And two people. Well, one's not a person. One's another type of being, and then a person as well. And we're going through that. So we've been thinking about doing a podcast. But that's a little bit too big of a topic to get into, I think, in just a few minutes. But it is something that you need to explore and not like push away, and not try to avoid or to cheer up, right? Or to have a stiff upper lip. You have to bravely and fiercely walk into grief head first. It's part of being alive, fully alive. You can't live and you can't praise and celebrate and enjoy the good times if you can't walk into the grief, because the grief is the love. It's love expressed. Right? If the people who love that person don't grieve, then that means that person didn't matter. Because that person mattered and because you loved them, then you have to grieve.
Okay, perhaps the last question. What do you concentrate on when you drink tea? Is it the taste, the inner state, any thoughts on anything else?
That's what I concentrate on when I drink tea. Concentration, I don't think concentration is about the furrowing of the brow and the laserness of coming down into one thing. That's a different type of concentration, samadhi, or one pointedness of mind. And actually, earlier we were talking about the relationship between Zen and tea. There's a type of tea called Dian Cha, which is that Dian is the Chinese word for samadhi. It's that goes back to the Song Dynasty, that discussion of like making tea with the one-pointed mind. But it's not this. It's actually a relaxed openness, the way an athlete is. They're very, very, very concentrated and very, very present, but they're not hyper-focused on one thing, right? They're aware of the environment. They're aware of the tennis racket in their hand. They're aware of their feet. They're aware of, like, it's kind of all at once, right? And then, of course, there's the focus, which is the ball. But they're not focusing on the ball to the exclusion of the racket or their legs or the environment or the net or like the whole or the opponent, right? They're not, you can't hone in on that thing. So there is that point of focus, which is the flow of the water into the pot and the flow of the tea into the cups, and there is a point where the brewing is at any given moment, right? As I pick this up, it's here. And now it's here, and then there's a point here and here, but the awareness is also kind of open and aware of everything, even though there is a point. The tennis ball is the point of focus, but there's also a like peripheral awareness and openness around that. It's not like just focused on that to the exclusion of everything else. If you do that, the opponent will mislead you and you'll miss or something, right? There has to be also environmental awareness. So samadhi is an open concentration, not a closed concentration, right? So first you learn the method. And that's like in meditation, you need a method of meditation to adhere to. As the mind drifts away, you come back. As the mind drifts away, you come back. So in tea, we learn the method. We learn what's called tamai. We learn the method and the method of brewing. And then over some years, we just adhere to that. And our mind wanders and nope, come back. Do this, do that, do this, do that. You just like steps, like a formula or something. You just keep coming back to that. And then over time, that starts to become second nature. Your hands can do it even as your mind wanders, right? Like martial arts, you start with forms, right? But when somebody attacks you in real life, you can't do forms. But that doesn't mean the doing of the forms was not important. It was absolutely important. That tennis player hit their racket again and again in a particular form in practice. That particular form that they were using in practice literally with a machine, that's not going to do them any good in the actual tennis match. If they start doing what they were doing with the machine, when the other person will just hit it over here and they will lose. So it's not, in the moment, it's not going to do them any good, but that doesn't mean it was a waste of time to do that. That form had to be ingrained in their muscles. It prepared the body for the ability to move in any direction and adapt to the present moment as it unfolds. So in the beginning, you use method, but then you begin to add, breath. So you begin to understand the relationship between breath and movement. And then finally you start to allow the breath to push the movements, right? And then, deeper yet is energetic aspects of the flow of qi and things in your tea brewing. So there's always more to learn. There's always more to practice. There's always more to grow. It's always going on and refined. The idea of being present, though, even though there is a focal point, don't think of it in terms of like focus on that focus point to the exclusion of all else. With your brows furrowed, that type of concentration. Right? There's two concentrations. One is like a laser, and another type of concentration is open and yet fully present and not distracted and fully here. And I can focus on the camera, but I'm peripherally aware of Connor and Shandong over here, and I'm peripherally aware of the environment, and yet I'm focused on the camera, right? So that's the kind of mindfulness I think that is encouraged in tea. Loose, open, but present and focused. All right, thank you. Lots of really great questions today, and wonderful opportunity for me as well to learn and to think about these things. And some of these questions I need to think about more even. I walk away wondering, as some of you no doubt do. Remember, our teachings are not philosophical stances or arguments on the nature of reality. Teachings are invitations to explore. They are new ways of thinking. They are questions. And then those questions result in more questions and more questions and more wonder and exploration and openness and learning and growth. I wish you all that and safety and peace and health during this challenging time for all of us. I hope that these gatherings at least provide for you some fellowship and connection to others, and maybe also some things to chew on and think about and work with over the course of this week as you hopefully use this opportunity to cultivate yourself, and maybe these discussions, as they will for me, will result in some deeper understanding and contemplations and ultimately wisdom. I hope you're all very peaceful, that you have some wonderful tea to drink, and that you can do so in a safe environment. Thank you so much.